All the elves are considered to be the children of Isha, the goddess and protector of the natural world and harmony. Her all-seeing eye is ever set on the world, watching over the elven race and nurturing them from above. It is to her that many pray for rich harvest and health, for she is the giver of life. Forbidden to meet them herself in the mortal planes by the will of Aenarion, her grace shines upon the seekers through the EVERQUEEN, the most beloved of her offspring. ASTARIELLE was the first of the EVERQUEENs, endowed with light and strength so that she may guide her people through times of peace and turbulence alike. She held court in the oldest elven kingdom of Ulthuan, the green region of Avalon. The EVERQUEEN and her people walked through the celestial forests of this summerland as nomads, setting up silken tents at night and singing along the rivers in the day. At an unknown time, an ancient tree in the heart of a mainland forest began to stretch its roots out. This tree was the Oak of Ages, and the forest in which it belonged was like no other, for there was an ancient and powerful magic that seeped into the trunks and brought trees to life. For ages, the trees came to think, move, and feel all there was to feel. Anger and hate, friendship and compassion. As the reach of the Oak of Ages expanded across vast distances, the powerful spirits of the Great Forest were able to journey to foreign lands through the world routes. When the spirits first arrived in Avalon, they were met with awe of the near-immortal elves. Many of these newcomers warmed to the gentle folk of Avalon upon noticing their naive fascination with nature and their kindness towards the forest critters. With time, the spirits and the elves learned to live together in harmony as the seeds of trust and respect towards each other grew. One of such spirits, the wise Durthu, or Oakheart as he was called by the elves, took a deep liking of these beings and trusted them with many secrets of the forest. Unbeknownst to anyone, his fondness of the elves, particularly of the EVERQUEEN, would shape the future of both the Great Forest and of Astarielle's people in the forthcoming ages. Back in that golden age, the spirits danced above the skies and the elves beneath them, without the worry of war and death. Such serenity came to an abrupt and unexpected end after the polar gates collapsed and the chaos energies flowed freely into the world, twisting and corrupting everything. The legendary beings that originally shaped the world, called the Old Ones, abandoned everything they had built to its fate in the face of the coming doom. Chaos engulfed the world, and darkness spread far and wide, devouring life wherever it flourished. Ulthuan was not spared from the terrible suffering the legions of demons had brought upon many young civilizations. Settlements burned, and many cities were burned to the ground. Men, dwarfs, orcs, and many other races alike suffered greatly at the hands of the newly arrived foe. But the demon hosts, above all else, craved the virtuous souls of the elves, and so they struck the island of Ulthuan, and they did it vigorously. In the midst of the madness and destruction, many elven heroes arose to challenge and stop the new menace. Greatest of them all was Aenarion the Defender, a brave warrior who united the people to brave the chaos tides together and to stand in the way of annihilation that was deemed certain. he hurled himself at the flames of Aenarion in the hopes that his sacrifice would save his people from doom. The flames consumed him, but was then quickly healed and reborn, with the light of Aenarion now burning within his breast and a newfound power. Aenarion was declared the first of the Phoenix King by the elves, and his crusade brought a halt to the Chaos invasion in Ulthuan. In that time of restless calm, Aenarion married Astarielle, and they shared a short-lived bliss together. The king was deeply in love with the EVERQUEEN, and his affection grew only stronger once she bore him precious offspring, Marelian and EVERQUEEN. However, when their land fell into the grasp of chaos once more, Aenarion led his forces to battle again, while Astarielle took the younglings to the relative safety of Avalon. The EVERQUEEN hoped for the forest to shield them from misery and death, but deep in her heart, she feared the strength of the spirits would not be enough, as this invasion was fiercer, and the number of demons was greater than the first Chaos incursion. The land of Avalon had remained untouched by the shadows since the beginning of the invasion, for the demons sensed the powerful energy of Durthu and the spirits of the forest, and went for the easier prey first. Nonetheless, a tragic day arrived when Avalon could not be spared by the sheer presence of the spirits alone. Alas, with Aenarion and his army fighting far away, help was out of reach. As the flames swallowed the Summerland, the demons flowed into the forest with a great hunger for the souls awaiting them. The last sanctuary Ulthuan held was breached, and with it, the temporary peace Astarielle had found for herself and her loved ones was over. Instead of leaving for the safety of the great forest, the spirits stood together with the elven warriors of Avalon, for they had seen the benefit of fighting together against this common and undeniably powerful enemy. Yet the nightmare they witnessed with their waking eyes was not to be stopped or slowed down. With every passing hour, more of the elves were slain in the forest that was no longer a home, but a burning graveyard. The demons were spreading like a disease, tainting the forest spirits and turning them mad as they fought, forever corrupting their souls. The few that survived were pushed further and further into the heart of the forest, surrounded with flames and nowhere to hide. As the heavens turned red and the sun began to set, Astarielle stood still before the wall of fire sizzling around them. With tears running down her face, the EVERQUEEN turned to Durthu and begged him to take Marelian and EVERQUEEN away to safety through the world routes. She knew her last breath was nearing, yet if her daughter EVERQUEEN died, the line of the EVERQUEEN would come to an abrupt end. It was a grand favour to ask from the ancient spirit, for never before had the spirits carried blooded creatures through the roots of the Oak of Ages and into the heartland of Athel-Loren. Although Durthu harboured much liking for the EVERQUEEN, he wished not to act against the wishes of his own kind. His gaze turned upon the last of the elven warriors who were being cast down, and then to the spirits who had chosen to stay with their allies until the end. It was then Durthu realized that, against the darkness that had arisen from the oblivion, there was no victory to be won by the spirits alone. If they were to last at all, it was only together, for in all those years living beside one another, both the spirits and the elves had grown wiser and stronger. At last, as the world around them crumbled away, the ancient Durthu accepted Astarielle's desperate plea. However, if he was to carry the children to the relative safety of the Great Forest, there would be a price to pay. The forest would claim the elves to save the spirits and the trees in their time of need. There was neither time to waste nor chance for lengthy goodbyes, for a nefarious demon with curled horns crushed the last of Astarielle's warriors. This nightmarish being with 4 long arms was Nekari, the greatest slayer of the chaos god Slanesh, and the feaster of pain. Astarielle held Morellian and Yvraine for the last time and hurriedly gave them to the care of the Tree Lord. Now that her beloved ones were beyond the reach of this havoc, she had yet one last thing to do before being ripped away from the world of the living. The EVERQUEEN calmly walked towards the colossal demon that dwarfed her and challenged it with all the powerful magic she possessed. A disheartened Durthu kept his promise and left Avalon with the 2 young elves, who were put into a magical slumber to spare them from the terror unfolding all around them. All the better, Durthu thought, for the sorrow they were to find once awake could wait. After the world roots carried them back to Durthu's home, he realized that in the centuries he was gone, the time had not stood still for the Great Forest either. The green blanket which had once clad nearly the entire world was now merely stretching between the shoulders of 2 mountain ranges. Scaled down as it was, but fortunately the forest was more or less preserved in the way it had always been. Keeping the violent wars and incursions at the borders of the years had taken its toll on some of the spirits though. Some of them were more bitter and violent than Durthu remembered them to be. Initially he was reluctant to meet with the other elders, with a good reason too, for he feared he had disgraced the Oak of Ages and the culture of his own kind by bringing the 2 elves to their sacred forest. Lingering was of no use, so he presented Astarielle's offsprings to his fellow treemen, and awaited the consequences. The eldest and the wisest of them all, Adanu, was ever afraid of change, and felt offended by Durthu's disregard for their ancient customs. The hostile and fierce Codal, on the other hand, seemed to be rather furious with the sheer presence of the blooded creatures in their home. At long last, following much bickering, Adanu allowed the elves to stay in Durthu's safekeeping, but only if they were kept in their slumber. Not that the wise Tree Lord was wholly convinced, yet the times were changing, and if they were not to change along, the forest would surely perish. Perhaps the forest would one day need the elves, as much as Astarielle's offspring needed them now. And perhaps it was Durthu's bargain that would forestall the terrible fate Adanu deeply feared. So did Morellian and Yvraine sleep under the canopy of trees, with the ever-watchful eyes of Durthu upon them. Back in Ulthuan, Aenarion was given the news of his wife's passing, and believed their offsprings to be dead too, as they were nowhere to be found. Grief and pain consumed him, filling his mind with vengeance only and hardening his heart. The pain was much to bear, and he eventually reached for the altar of Cain, the elven god of war, where the sword of Cain rested. He grabbed this powerful sword, unleashing unimaginable power, but also tainting him. The elves banished the Chaos Invasion once again, but the price had been very high. The act of grabbing the sword of Cain, without him fully knowing, had set the stones for yet more turbulent times for his people in the future. In time, Avalon was rid of the immediate danger, and the life began anew for the elves. Once the time was right, Durthu carried the two elves back to Ulthuan and left them in Gaean Vale to be found by their people. When they finally awoke from their long slumber, they remembered nothing of their time in the great forests. All they knew was the last embrace of their mother before they were saved by Durthu. EVERQUEEN later fulfilled her destiny as the spiritual guide of her people, while Aenarion stayed beside her sister to protect her from any harm. Never again did they meet Durthu, but it mattered not. The spirit had kept his promise to the late EVERQUEEN, and although he wished to help rebuild Avalon, he knew the great forest needed him more. Guiding the other spirits that were still in Avalon, Durthu journeyed back home through the world routes once more. This was not the last time the spirits were in the company of the elves, though. The bargain the EVERQUEEN and Durthu had made intertwined the fates of the elves and the spirits forever, and they would need each other again before their time in the mortal planes was over.